Good morning friends, welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal and in this video I'll be discussing with you economics current affairs for 14 June 2024. So like we started yesterday, we will be overlaying questions on top of the articles that we'll be discussing that I have selected for you. So let me quickly run you through the questions that we'll be discussing in today's lecture. So the first question is around CBDC or central bank digital currency. So the question goes like this. Despite significant efforts by the Reserve Bank of India to promote CBDC or e-rupee, the adoption rate remains low. Analyze the factors contributing to the tepid or the lukewarm adoption of e-rupee in the context of India's digital payment landscape. Discuss potential strategies that RBI could implement to enhance the adoption and usability of the e-rupee, considering both technological and regulatory aspect. So this question or this article is completely revolving or rotating around CBDC, why it was introduced, when it was introduced, what are the problems, what are the challenges that other countries are facing, what are the India specific challenges that we are facing, and how we can overcome those challenges is the entire focus area of this particular article. As you can see that this article can help you in answering this very beautiful question that can be asked in any examination that you may face. Next question that we will be discussing is something like this. Discuss the recent proposals by India's Bureau of Energy Efficiency aimed at reducing automotive emissions and promoting clean mobility. How do these measures reflect India's commitment towards zero emission technologies, and what challenges and opportunities do they present for the automotive industry and environmental stability? Right? So completely around automotives, completely around pollution, electric vehicle, hydrogen powered vehicles, and so on and so forth. The next question again is a very specific question. You may not face this in the examination as a full-blown question, maybe as a short part of some other answer, or maybe a standalone small question. Discuss the significance of recent grants approved by Center for Startups in the technical textiles sector under the National Technical Textiles Mission. Assess the potential challenges and opportunities for India to emerge as a global leader in technical textiles in light of these developments. Basically focus upon the technical textiles subsector of the textile sector, so to speak. Let us start, right? So let's start talking about India's digital rupee. If there's any question, any doubt, please ask. So as you all know that RBI has introduced and RBI is trying to boost retail central bank digital currency, also known as e-rupee. Okay, so we are taking a lot of steps so that e-rupee popularization increases. Okay, so we are adding offline functionality so that you need not be necessarily online to use e-rupee. We are thinking in terms of allowing cross-border payments using e-rupee. We have also spoken with non-bank payment service providers so that they can popularize e-rupee through their platform. We are also trying to make e-rupee interoperable through UPI, because everybody has gotten hooked to UPI, to GPays, to Paytms, and so on and so forth kinds of interfaces. So we just want to make it interoperable with UPI. These are the kind of steps that we are taking. But despite everything that we have done, at least so far, the adoption of e-rupee has remained fairly lukewarm. Now, a certain amount of data is very important for you to throw in the answers, because without that, your answer is very weak. It is unsupported, it is unsubstantiated. So if you look at data up till 31st May 2024, you will see that e-rupee had approximately 323 crores in circulation, as compared to, let us say, $35 trillion or 35 trillion rupees of banknotes in circulation. So you can see that 323 crore is a very tiny fraction of 35 trillion, right? I don't even know what the fraction is. Must be, way less than 1% or something like that. I don't know, right? 4.6 million consumers have signed on. 400,000 merchants have signed up to use e-rupee. But when we see e-rupee as a fraction of UPI transfers, so it is a tiny fraction. Where RBI Deputy Governor T. Ravi Shankar, he himself mentioned that there is a downtrend in daily e-rupee transactions. Now we need to understand what's really happening. We have understood the problem. We have understood what we are trying to do. Now, why does the problem exist? I want to quickly walk you through why does the problem exist kind of causes. So, see, first of all, UPI is widely popular. UPI is real time. UPI is bank to bank, peer to peer, merchant to merchant, or peer to merchant kind of transfer that is happening. On the other hand, e-rupee is a digital alternative to cash, Okay, e-rupee can be exchanged via wallets or the UPI infrastructure. There is no as such obvious added value for moving to e-rupee when you already have UPI, which you are used to, which you are comfortable with, which you trust, which you have been using for a very long period of time. You have no obvious reasons to move to e-rupee. So there is a clear preference for UPI. And this weak adoption of any kind of a CBDC, particularly for a retail CBDC, so this is not a problem specific to India. Other countries are also facing similar challenges, whether it is China or any other country which has introduced CBDC. Several common obstacles exist. Like for example, like we said about UPI, so in China, Alipay exists, right? So whatever the existing online payment systems are there, they are so strong and so robust and so popular that people do not have an obvious incentive to move to this particular kind of currency. Okay, so robust digital infrastructure may not be there in certain countries. Regulatory ambiguity may be there in certain countries. Trust may not be there in certain countries, right? Like for instance, there was, I'm not going to take you into the details of all these things. It is sufficient to know that Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, they introduced something called as Dcash pilot that did not become successful. Bahamas introduced Sand Dollar that did not become successful. Nigeria introduced E-Naira that did not become successful. Jamaica introduced Jamdax that did not become successful. And broadly, the problems can be highlighted in these particular points over here, that there is weak internet connectivity, poor digital infrastructure, integration problems are there with traditional banking, public awareness is low, and incentives essentially are not there. Like I mentioned to you, just the way UPI is very strong in India, China mein Alipay and WeChat Pay are very strong. People have been using it. Why should they move to anything else? So similar is the problem that we are facing. Now, like I said that, okay, we are trying to make e-rupee interoperable with UPI. We are trying to do government to person transaction using UPI. We are trying to do cross-border payments via e-rupee. I'm sorry, right? So if I take all these steps, maybe e-rupee will become popular. See, e-rupee technically is more safer because e-rupee is a liability of RBI. If anything happens to your e-rupee, RBI will pay you. If anything happens through your UPI network or anything mishap happens, then probably it's nobody's liability, it's your fault. Are you getting my point? So in that sense, e-rupee is definitely more safer, and RBI is trying a variety of things, and government can try a variety of things to make e-rupee more popular. Like for example, they can think in terms of giving subsidy transfers in the form of e-rupee. They can think in terms of paying bureaucrats and civil servants and such kinds of employees of government across various levels in the form of e-rupee so that its usage becomes popular, right? Now there is this new concept of programmability that I have come across. So the idea being that IndusInd Bank, they use programmable e-rupee to pay farmers for carbon credits. So what we are essentially doing over here is that, you do some activities or you become eligible to receive e-rupee and then you automatically receive e-rupee, right? So this kind of a programmability, while it is sounding very cool and fancy, right, it is definitely creating a challenge related to fungibility, that is me being able to transfer that money once I have received it, and the liquidity, me being able to use that money as, let us say, cash for carrying out various transactions, with additional issues related to privacy and public trust also being there. So we don't know whether programmable e-rupee or introducing programmability in e-rupee, where you get e-rupee when you qualify certain criterias or benchmarks, we don't know what the impact will be upon economic behavior, upon inequality, etc. So we need to walk on this path with care. But the challenges that we are facing in popularizing our RCBDC, that is retail central bank digital currency, aren't something specific only to us. A lot of other countries are facing similar challenges. So you can clearly see that this entire question over here regarding CBDC, problems, causes, challenges that others are facing, what are the kind of steps that can be taken, all of these questions or sub questions get answered to a certain extent via this article. If you have liked this discussion, please download this particular document from the Ecoholics app. You don't need to pay anything. You don't need to wait for anybody. You can do a quick registration and download this particular document going ahead, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Now let us see what's happening so far as electric vehicles is concerned. So I don't know whether you all have been following this series, but this is a daily current affairs lecture from Monday to Saturday. We have been doing this since 1st May. And in one of the previous lectures, I did speak about the exact same topic that I'm now going to now talk about. So if you've already seen that lecture, this is going to be a refresher, right? An update. If you have not seen that lecture, then this is going to be really new stuff for you. Okay. Now, obviously, India is pushing towards zero emissions, and if you want to achieve zero emissions, then you really need to do something about your automobile emissions, right? Motor vehicle emissions, obviously, correct? So definitely automotive emissions are going to come down, and your Bureau of Energy Efficiency is working towards putting into place a regulatory framework, a policy ecosystem which will help in this transition. So what is happening is that there is a lot of emphasis for low and zero emission technologies now. Okay, and car makers are being dangled a carrot so that they can move towards these low emission vehicles, and they are being dangled a stick so that they can move away from, let us say, high emission kind of vehicles. Now let me explain something which may be slightly new and complicated upfront for you. Okay, there is something called as CAFE. What is CAFE? Right, so it's not your cafe coffee day, bad joke. Corporate average fuel economy. That is what CAFE stands for. Corporate average fuel economy. Corporate average fuel economy. Let us say that you are Tata Motors and you are producing a variety of vehicles. You are producing 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, commercial vehicles, passenger vehicles, different categories of passenger vehicles, different categories of commercial vehicles, so on and so forth, right? So corporate average fuel economy is looking at what? It is looking at the total average, the average emission that all the vehicles that you have produced are emitting. That is what your corporate average fuel economy is looking at. What is it looking at? It is looking at the average emission that all the vehicles that you as a company has produced and put out in the market. Okay. Now we want you to pull this average down. How will you pull this average down? As a company, you'll start manufacturing more cleaner vehicles, more electric vehicles, more hydrogen powered vehicles, more hybrid vehicles, etc. That is what you will do. Okay. So stringent requirements are being put on you as a company to pull your CAFE 3 or your corporate average fuel economy down, right? That's the basic idea that you need to keep in mind, right? Now, earlier BEE, that is Bureau of Energy Efficiency, was being very, very ambitious and aggressive regarding these CAFE 3 and CAFE 4 standards. They were saying, right, they were saying that CAFE 3 standards will end by 2030, and CAFE 4 standards, which are more stringent, will kick in from, let's say, 2030 or something like that. Now we are saying that CAFE 3 standards will go on till 2032. Okay, so you have more breathing room, you have more time. Okay, so that's the basic idea over here, that you will get a more breathing room, more time, and these ambitious targets have been watered down. Earlier what BEE was doing was that it was mimicking policy in Europe. It was kind of trying to go on European standards very, very quickly, but Indian conditions are different, our challenges are different, so some kind of breathing room has been provided. Okay, now you need to understand over here that you will get an extended time period for compliance. So you don't have to achieve, let us say, CAFE 4 standards in 3-year block. You can actually achieve CAFE 4 standards in a 4-year block, right? So what is CAFE 4 standards? We want you to be able to have this average of 70 grams of carbon dioxide emission per kilometer. 70 gram of carbon dioxide emission per kilometer, right? We want you to achieve this standard. This will be the CAFE 4 standard. And you have 5-year block between 2032 and 2037 to achieve this particular cycle. Another very important update over here is that there are two, again, very technical terms that are floating around. One is called MIDC, and it's not Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, in case you're thinking like that. It is Modified Indian Driving Cycle. That is what MIDC stands for. And then there is WLTP, which is Worldwide Harmonized Light Vehicles Test Procedure Cycle. Right. So what are these MIDC and WLTP cycles? So essentially, see, if you want to check how much emission is coming from vehicles based upon, the distance that they're covering. So how do you exactly go about measuring that? So there are different ways of doing that. So one is MIDC, which is very Indian way of doing things. And then there is a global way of doing things, that is WLTP. So MIDC is less stringent than WLTP, right? So what they are saying over here is that until 2027, emissions from our vehicles, they will be measured based on MIDC only rather than WLTP. Okay, so MIDC is your standardized driving test, which will measure fuel consumption and emission, right? Whereas WLTP is far more rigorous, right, than let us say MIDC. Okay, why have we not moved to WLTP immediately? Well, if we try to move to WLTP immediately, that would mean imposing additional testing burdens on manufacturers, and we don't want to do that. Additional testing procedures means additional cost, means additional standard compliance, means additional R&D, means additional transition challenges. We want to give them a breathing room. That's the basic idea over here, right? So these are some of the things that are getting discussed. Okay, another very important aspect over here is that there is something called as super credit factor, right? So see, what is going to happen is that hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles ka super credit factor will increase from, let us say, 3 to 5, right, in both cafe 3 and cafe 4, right? So what we are doing over here is that, see, there is something called as volume load factor, and that influences the crediting mechanism for different types of vehicles, right? So how much, so let's say that you produce a clean vehicle, how much credit do you get, right? So this credit that you get, it depends upon this super credit factor. So what we have done is that for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, we have increased the super credit factor from, let us say, 3 to 5 in both cafe 3 and cafe 4. For battery electric vehicles, we have increased the super credit factor from 3 to 4, right? For plug-in hybrids, right, we have decreased the super credit factor from 2.5 to 2 and further to 1.5 in cafe 4. For strong hybrids, we have reduced the super credit factor from 2 to 1.2 and further to 1 in cafe 4, right? So why are we doing this? So this super credit factor, it is basically a multiplier, and that gives you extra credit to for producing, let us say, low or zero carbon emission vehicles. If you want, you can just try to Google up a little bit about the super credit factor, but it is very, very important, right? When we are doing that CAFE calculation, the average emission calculation, etc. So this super credit factor must be playing a very important role. So essentially, if you produce more hydrogen, more battery electric vehicles, you will get better credit, higher credit. Earlier, hybrids were also attracting decent amount of super credit, but now hybrid is outdated because you can move to pure battery, you can move to hydrogen if you want to, if you really invest in that kind of direction, and that is what we want you to do, which is exactly why we are giving you higher super credit for higher multiplier for those kinds of vehicles, right? So I've given you a complete sense of what's happening so far as automotive emissions is concerned. Whenever there is again an update, I'll always come back and share that as well, right? Now let me walk you through what's happening in the technical textiles space, right? So there is this very important government scheme called National Technical Textiles Mission. Okay, so technical textiles are basically used in defense, in medical, in let us say in construction. They are also used for hygiene purposes, right? They're used in automobiles, right? So it's not your typical garment that you wear, but it's something much more functional, something much more industrial, something much more long lasting, right? So what has happened is that 50 lakh rupees each has been provided to 7 startups in the technical textiles space, so that we can promote innovation and sustainability, etc., right? So the ministry itself, the textile ministry, it has set a target to support 150 startups so that we can promote technical textiles, right? And I don't want to go into the details of this, right? But the important point over here is that the textile ministry, they have relaxed the royalty cap on this scheme. So every fund provider, it takes a percentage of the profit that the startup earns as royalty in return for their investments. Because if you are an investor, you are putting in the money, you need the money back, right? That's common sense, right? But they have relaxed the royalty cap. Now this relaxation will make the journey easier for startups. See, if I'm a startup making a small amount of profit, it's better for me to plow that profit back into my companies in the form of investments rather than giving it out in the form of royalty to the government of India. Government of India, as it is sitting on a lot of money, and they can borrow money, and they are not in need of my small peanuts amount of changes or money. They can do without that money. So that's what government of India has done, that they've relaxed the royalty cap, which is a very good thing, right? Apart from that, sustainability, composites, high performance, meditech, smart textiles, right? These are the areas that have been approved. These are the areas where we want our manufacturers to develop domain expertise. Okay. Now this grant is NTTM's grant for research and entrepreneurship. across aspiring innovators in technical textiles. This is the grade scheme that we are talking about. So in case you are asked about the grade scheme, then you know that it's about technical textiles. You know that it is related to NTTM, right? Rest of the things over here are pretty mundane, right? The idea is that these approved startups, just to give you a sense of what's happening over here, so they will be manufacturing braided composites for military application. They will be manufacturing Radmon integrated IFF antennas, surgical simulation models for training doctors, nanofiber infused textiles for energy generation and sensing it, right? So you can see that we're talking about really cool high-tech kind of stuff, right? So that's about the recent development. So NTTM, it was itself launched in 2020. The idea being that we want to position India as a global leader in technical textiles, right? We want to promote research, promote innovation, promote technical textiles as a sector, right? So that's about the most important parts of this particular article, right? So you see pretty rapid fire, 3 questions, one on RBDC, one on Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and one on National Technical Textiles Mission, done and dusted with, right? So this is what I want to do. If there is any question that you have for me, please feel free to ask, right? Charulata has a question. If there's a transaction between 2 parties and if one party pays the other with a e-rupee, it can only happen if both of them maintain such e-rupee wallets. Am I right? I think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, see, the moment I make it interoperable with UPI, then I don't think that this particular limitation is applicable, because I have UPI, right? I can receive via UPI and you can send the way you want to send. But if it is not, then that's a problem. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that when we are saying cross-border payments, the other person may not necessarily have the ability to receive e-rupee, but I'm still sending it across, right? So this is the exact, if this is the challenge, then this is the exact challenge that we're trying to overcome, that we don't want to, hinder. Like for example, even when I, let's say, didn't activate my UPI account, right? Still somebody could have transferred money to my bank account, right? So that was possible. It was not possible. It was not impossible, right? So that's the broad idea that we need to kind of keep in mind. There are teething issues that need to be resolved. We are resolving those teething issues, but let's see. But yeah, it's a very good point that you are making. So guys, this was my submission, right? If it's received by UPI, then does it reflect in, of course it has to reflect in your bank account, right? That is another issue. Again, if I have to maintain a separate account for e-rupee and a separate account for my, let's say, banking purposes, then that's just increasing my difficulties. If it is received via UPI, it should be received in my existing bank account, right? Yeah, you are right. I think that for e-rupee you have a separate account enlisted with the Reserve Bank of India, if I'm not mistaken, right? That is where it reflects. But when you are having, let us say, a UPI interoperability, then it should reflect in your normal bank account. That is another teething challenge. I am assuming, Charulata, that you have recently read very long, very deep, very detailed articles discussing the variety of challenges that e-rupee is having to surmount to become as popular as UPI. So I think that yes, you are in the right direction, Charulata. These are all very valid points that you are making, and I hope that I have been able to add to your points and you'll be able to use them in the examination going ahead. So if anybody has any doubts, always feel free to ask, right? And thank you so much for showing the support yesterday in the comment section and by liking the video. We have started overlaying our discussion with certain questions that can be asked in the examination. Let me be a little honest to you. Not all questions are going to be really fantastic, ekdam exam level, ekdam exam ke andar uthne wala question, right? Maybe one question or maybe 2 question, every day will be coming to that kind of a level. In some rare days, good days, maybe all 3 questions will be absolutely exam level questions, right? But the basic idea that we are trying to have over here is that we want to enable you to walk on this path of contemplating questions, thinking what the answer should be, and probably attempting to write the answer. That is what we want you to do. That is why we have evolved our approach, where I was just discussing, let us say, current affairs article, to now discussing both the question as well as the article, right? So that's the approach that we will be continuing with. Thank you so much for joining in. We will meet you tomorrow again. Tomorrow is Saturday, so let's see what is the quality of articles that I am able to come across. Okay, so we'll meet you tomorrow and we'll take it ahead from there. Thank you so much. All the very best and Jai Hind to all of you. Bye bye.